Automotive industry in the United States. The automotive industry in the United States began in the 1890s and, as a result of the size of the domestic market and the use of mass production, rapidly evolved into the largest in the world. However, the United States was overtaken by Japan as the largest automobile producer in the 1980s, and subsequently by China in 2008. The US is currently second among the largest manufacturers in the world by volume. American manufacturers produce approximately 8 to 10 million units annually. Notable exceptions were 5.7 million automobiles manufactured in 2009 due to crisis, while production peaked during the 1970s and early 2000s at levels of 13 to 15 million units. Starting with Duryea in 1895, at least 1900 different companies were formed, producing over 3,000 makes of American automobiles. World War I, 1917 to 1918, and the Great Depression in the United States, 1929 to 1939, combined to drastically reduce the number of both major and minor producers. During World War II, all the auto companies switched to making military equipment and weapons. However, by the end of the next decade, the remaining smaller producers disappeared or merged into amalgamated corporations. The industry was dominated by three large companies: General Motors, Ford, and Chrysler, all based in Metro Detroit. Those big three continued to prosper, and the US produced 3/4 of all automobiles in the world by 1950, 8.0 million out of 10.6 million. Imports from abroad were a minor factor before the 1960s. Beginning in the 1970s, a combination of high oil prices and increased competition from foreign auto manufacturers severely affected the companies. In the ensuing years, the companies periodically bounced back, but by 2008 the industry was in turmoil due to the aforementioned crisis. As a result, General Motors and Chrysler filed for bankruptcy reorganization and were bailed out with loans and investments from the federal government. But according to Automotive Corp., June 2014 seasonally adjusted annualized sales is the biggest in history with 16.98 million vehicles and toppled previous record in July 2006. Prior to the 1980s, most manufacturing facilities were owned by the big three: GM, Ford, Chrysler, and AMC. Their US market share has dropped steadily as numerous foreign-owned car companies have built factories in the US. Toyota had 31,000 direct employees in the US in 2012, meaning a total payroll of about $2.1 billion, compared to Ford's 80,000 US employees supplying their 3,300 dealerships and Chrysler's 71,100 US employees supplying their 2,328 dealerships. About 3,000 automobile companies have existed in the United States. In the early 1900s, the US saw the rise of the big three automakers, Ford, GM, and Chrysler. The industry became centered around Detroit, in Michigan, and adjacent states, and nearby Ontario, Canada. Historian John Ray summarizes the explanations provided by historians: a central geographic location, water access, and an established industrial base with many skilled engineers. The key factor was that Detroit was the base for highly talented entrepreneurs who saw the potential of the automobile. Henry Ford, Ransom E. Olds, Roy D. Chapin, Henry Joy, William C. Durant, Howard E. Coffin, John Dodge and Horace Dodge, and Benjamin Briscoe and Frank Briscoe. From 1900 to 1915, these men transformed the fledgling industry into an international business. Henry Ford began building cars in 1896 and started his own company in 1903. The Ford Motor Company improved mass production with the first conveyor belt-based assembly line in 1913, producing the Model T, which had been introduced in 1908. These assembly lines significantly reduced costs. The first models were priced at $850, but by 1924 had dropped to $290. The Model T sold extremely well and Ford became the largest automobile company in the US by the time it was retired in 1927. More than 15 million Model Ts had been sold. Ford introduced the Model A in 1927, after a 6-month production stoppage to convert from the Model T, and produced it through 1931. However, while the Model A was successful, Ford lost ground to GM and eventually Chrysler, as auto buyers looked to more upscale cars and newer styling. Ford was also a pioneer in establishing foreign manufacturing facilities, with production facilities created in England in 1911 and Germany and Australia in 1925. Ford purchased the luxury Lincoln automaker in 1922 and established the Mercury division in 1939. General Motors Corporation, GM, the company that would soon become the world's largest automaker, was founded in 1908 by William Durant. Durant had previously been a carriage maker and had taken control of Buick in 1904. The company initially acquired Buick, Oldsmobile and Oakland, later to become Pontiac, in 1908. The next year GM acquired Cadillac, along with a number of other car companies and parts suppliers. Durant also was interested in acquiring Ford, but after initial merger talks, Henry Ford decided to keep his company independent. In 1910, Durant lost control of GM after overextending the company with its acquisitions. A group of banks took over control of GM and ousted Durant. Durant and Louis Chevrolet founded Chevrolet in 1913 and it quickly became very successful. Durant began acquiring stock in GM and by 1915 had majority control. Chevrolet was acquired by GM in 1917 and Durant was back in charge of Grams. In 1921, Durant was again forced out of the company. During the late 1920s, General Motors overtook Ford to become the largest automaker. Under the leadership of Alfred P. Sloan, General Motors instituted decentralized management and separate divisions for each price class. They also introduced annual model changes. GM also became an innovator in technology under the leadership of Charles F. Kettering. GM followed Ford by expanding overseas, including purchasing England's Vauxhall Motors in 1925, Germany's Opel in 1929, and Australia's Holden in 1931. GM also established GMAC, now Ally Financial, in 1919 to provide credit for buyers of its cars. Walter Chrysler was formerly president of Buick and an executive of Grams. After leaving GM in 1920, he took control of the Maxwell Motor Company, revitalized the company and, in 1925, reorganized it into Chrysler Corporation. He then acquired Dodge in 1927. The acquisition of Dodge gave Chrysler the manufacturing facilities and dealer network that it needed to significantly expand production and sales. In 1928, Chrysler introduced the Plymouth and DeSoto brands. Chrysler also overtook Ford to become the second largest automaker by the 1930s, following similar strategies as General Motors. General Motors wanted automobiles to be not just utilitarian devices, which Ford emphasized, but also status symbols that were highly visible indicators of an individual's wealth. Through offering different makes and models, they offered different levels in social status, meeting the demands of consumers needing to display wealth. Ford and General Motors each had their own impact on social status and the type of market they were targeting. Henry Ford focused on delivering one inexpensive, efficient product for the masses. Ford's offer was one car, one color, for one price. He not only manufactured a product for the masses, but he provided a $5 a day wage so that there was a local market to buy this product. By contrast, General Motors offered a product that catered to those looking to gain status by having that sense of individualism and offering different make, models, and quality.